Welcome to Painting in Your PJs live with Minette. It's starting to get cold here, and I've got my favorite pair of flannel jammies on this morning and a really sweet and short poem from Mary Oliver. And I have to be honest, I was looking at the step outs for day 23, and I'm like, I just don't have the bandwidth this morning to try something so complicated. So I'm going to skip ahead to day 24. I'm going to practice day 23 and I'll toss up a recorded video instead of, excuse me, instead of a live video. And I really love the pattern that I'm going to share with you today, which is Flutch. Flutch, Flutch for day 24 by Heidi S.K. And I love Heidi's work, and she has some lovely, lovely patterns. Let me get back to my step outs here. And it's going to fit nicely on this page. This is my only live video for this week of October 23 to whatever it is. I'm hosting an in-person retreat here in my home, and we'll be taking the next few days to really focus on that, but hoping to squeeze in a couple more recorded videos or even maybe some lives at some odd times. But welcome if you're brand new to Painting in Your PJs with Minette. I'm Dr. Minette Riordan, and I am about art as creative process and a tool for personal growth and self-discovery. And I am combining two of my loves and passions, Zentangle and poetry, specifically Mary Oliver's poetry. And I am literally tangling inside the pages of this lovely anthology, Devotions by Mary Oliver. And I have been doing some mono tangles as well as some combinations of tangles, and I've had a ton of fun doing this, and you can see either live or recorded. There was a total mess up one, either live or recorded videos of ultimately it will be all 31 days of the patterns and how to draw them from Inktober Tangles 2023, created by Stephanie Jennifer. This is only the second time I've participated, but I love finding new patterns, and I love also, now I've lost the poem I wanted to use. I love new patterns, but I also love practicing familiar patterns. There it is. And so, good morning, Barbara. Great to see you. Are you home, my friend, after your months and months of amazing adventures? So, The Other Kingdoms is a sweet little poem to get us started. I loved the poem, and I loved this space to help us figure out how to draw this complicated pattern. It's a grid pattern, which I always find a little bit more complicated. We'll see how it goes. Good morning, Judy. Great to see you here. And again, this pattern is Flutch by Heidi S.K. And I've got the step outs, and like I said, it's a little bit of a tricky one, but let's start today with The Other Kingdoms by Mary Oliver. And if you're just stopping by and you're new, welcome, delighted that you're here. Please hit that subscribe button and click the little bell to get notified when I add new content or when I go live on the channel. And this is day 24 of Inktober Tangles. And again, this is my only live video for this week as I'm hosting an in-person retreat in my home. I bet you're so glad to be home, and what an amazing adventure you had, Barbara. Okay, The Other Kingdoms by Mary Oliver. Consider the other kingdoms. The trees, for example, with their mellow sounding titles, oak, aspen, willow, or the snow, for which the peoples of the north, I'm going to start over. So apparently my voice isn't quite awake yet this morning. Consider the other kingdoms. The trees, for example, with their mellow-sounding titles, oak, aspen, willow. Or the snow, for which the peoples of the north have dozens of words to describe its different arrivals. Or the creatures, with their thick fur, their shy and wordless gaze, their infallible sense of what their lives are meant to be. Thus the world grows rich, grows wild, and you too grow rich, grow sweetly wild, as you too were born to be. The Other Kingdoms by Mary Oliver. There's a lot to unpack in this beautiful little poem. The reminder that we are not the only creatures here on earth, but that there are others and that we're wild as well, right? I think it's just such a beautiful poem. I'm going to shut down my email so it's not bugging me in the background. Gorgeous little poem. All right, so let's work on this pattern fletch, and I'm going to draw it pretty big so that I can practice. And I'm going to start with my pencil to draw my string, and we're going to start with a square. If you were working on a tile or a bijou tile, that square would be drawn for you. But I'm going to draw this pretty big. Not going to worry about getting it perfectly square. Then I'm going to kind of pick that midway point, and I'm going to divide this square so that we have a nice big grid. So step one is just to make your grid. Step two is we're going to add some orbs, and I'm going to go ahead and come in with my Micron 01, and we're going to alternate where the orbs are inside of the grid pattern. So in the top left corner, we're going to have an orb here and an orb here. Then over to the right, we're going to have an orb here and an orb here. So these are vertical, these are horizontal. And then we're going to alternate the pattern in the bottom. So we have an orb here and an orb here, and one there and there. So we have 8 different orbs inside of our 4 squares. Now I can see where this could maybe get straightened up just a tiny little bit. And then we're going to add a leaf shape that looks a lot to me like a flux leaf. Flux is one of my favorite Zentangle patterns. And this is one of those patterns where we're going to practice turning our tile or our page quite a bit. So I'm going to have my flux is going to go from the top right of this orb all the way down to the top left of this orb over here. And I'm looking at her pattern, and I may eventually ink in those grid lines, but I'm not sure if I need to yet, so we'll see. So this is going to be a pretty big flux. So it's just a long leaf shape. And then I'm going to turn just a little bit so it's easy to reach. And I'm going to go from the top of this orb to the center of my box up here. Again, with that just nice rounded elongated flux leaf there. And over here I'm going to go from the bottom left to the center. And then we're just going to repeat as we go around. So I'm going to turn my book completely upside down here. And I can zoom back in a little bit as well. Get back to my step outs. So this time we are going to go from So I'm figuring out what's the easiest way for my hand to draw this. So I'm going to go from the left side of this one to the bottom left of this one, adding in those flex leaves. And then this one, that was where I was going when I had it upside down. Again, I'm going left to the bottom, left to the bottom. If I'm making you dizzy turning the page, I'm sorry. And from this one, we're going to go from the right to the midway point. From the right to the midway point. So you can start to see how the pattern is flowing. So this one, we're going to go bottom left to the bottom right with our flex leaf. And this one, we're going to go bottom right to that midway point. And there is our first round of flex leaves. Hi, Georgia. Good morning, Mary. Welcome, welcome. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of our little flex leaves so far. And then I'm going to continue to turn this to keep it easy for my hand to draw. And I'm going to tuck another leaf from the bottom of this orb all the way over to the corner up here, about 1/4 of an inch or 1/4 of a way down. Excuse me. And I'm going to tuck another leaf in there. It's a little bit smaller. And then this one is going to go from the top of the orb to the bottom 1/4 over here. So that top left, we have one going to the left and one going to the right. Excuse me, I should have grabbed my water bottle this morning. Okay, and then in this one over here, we're going to go from the top of the orb down to the bottom of our grid, our box here. Always repeating that same shape. And from this one, we're going to go from the bottom to the top. From the bottom to the top. So this one has a lot of steps. You can always watch the replay as needed. I'm going to turn my page and I'm going to repeat what I did up here. So I'm going to go from the bottom over to the side. And I'm going to go from the top over to the side. And we're going to repeat one more time here. We're going to go from the bottom to the top. And we're going to go from the top to the bottom. So we're just continuing to rotate those patterns around and around. And then for me, the next part was where it started to get a little more tricky. So, and it's the remembering that there's repetition, that these two are the same and these two are the same can help. So the lines on this one and the lines on this one are always going the same direction, and the same on these two. So I'm going to draw a long triangle behind my flex pattern in each corner of this box with rounded edges. So I'm going to start over here and I'm going to draw all the way down. I'm going behind those leaves back over here to the corner and back up again. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side, but I'm going to go in reverse. So the skinny part of my triangle will be at the top of the box. Always that drawing behind to create that nice layered look. And then I'm I'm going to draw all the triangles first, and then we're going to do quite a bit of blackening in of edges and areas. So I'm going to go ahead and draw the bottom right next because it's the same as the top left and I know what I'm doing. So I'm going to go up here, draw the top of that triangle, and bring that all the way down to my edge. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And I can see now where it would have been beneficial to ink in the outside lines, but I can do that in a little bit. And so I have 2 triangles here, 2 triangles here. I'm going to turn my page and have those triangles go the opposite direction. Making sure I'm still on the screen there. So we're going to start over here with the bottom of the triangle, drawing behind my flux, bringing that point all the way over to the edge. So on this one we'll have the triangle going that opposite direction, continuing to draw behind. And then we're going to come repeat that over here. Top of the triangle, bottom of the triangle, and then over here we're going to have the bottom of that triangle, drawing behind. Went a little too fast there and I got a little bit sticking over. So now you can kind of see where we've got all of those triangles. And then I'm going to come in with, I think with the PN or maybe the mono twin, because this is pretty big and I've got big spaces and I want this to go a little faster. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to blacken around the orbs inside the triangles, but we are not blackening the space in between. We want this space to stay white. So I'm going around the top of my flux and the bottom of my flux, and I'm going to blacken in the white spaces between the triangles. And I'm going to go ahead and bring that little bit of black down the outside as well, because I think I just kind of want some of that drama there. I'm going to come down to the bottom. Remember to always turn your page as needed. And I'm using a fat nib here because I drew the pattern really big. If I was working in a smaller space, I would choose a pen size that would help me to color in without going over the lines. I'm going to come in and blacken this up. So we're going to have some nice black right here in the center of all of this. Going around those orbs. Again, this is day 24. This is Flutch. The pattern is Flutch by Heidi K. It's a sweet pattern, but it's a complicated one. And day 23 was super complicated too, so I'm going to practice that one a little bit more, and then I will record a separate video once I understand the step outs. There are a lot of like crazy grid patterns this time around. Okay, so remember we're not coloring in the centers, we're only coloring in around the edges. So I'm going to give it a bold edge. I'm kind of liking that really bold edge, so I think I'm going to go ahead and put that bold edge all the way around, blackening in around the orb. Just taking my time. The slower we go, the better it is for mindful self-awareness and presence. It helps us to slow down, but also the better our art is, the cleaner the lines, the neater it will look, the slower you go. And those little tiny corners in there, this big fat nib is not my friend, so I'm being mindful of that. Finishing off the bottom of my box. All right, that's step 4. We're not done yet. We have 2 more steps to go on this pattern, and then we'll add some shading as well. But as soon as we add that blackening, you start to see the drama and start to really see this pattern come together. It is such a lovely pattern. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to draw an inner aura on each of our triangles, which is really going to help our triangles stand out a little bit. So an aura is simply an echo or a parallel of a line that's already there, and it can be drawn outside of a shape or inside of a shape. So I'm continuing to draw behind that original flux pattern and just bringing my triangles back to life. I'm going to go down here to the bottom, working in that same direction, remembering to turn your page as needed. And that little O1 is great for getting into some of those little nooks and crannies. And I'm going to turn my page. I'm going to do the same thing here. We're doing an inner aura of those triangles. Pretty small. My triangles aren't that big. You can see why I opted to draw this big. It's easier to see. And the last one over here. And that was step 5 of our Fletch pattern. Step 5 of our Fletch pattern. And then the final step before shading is we're going to weave in another set of our flex leaves, but we're going to draw them behind, inside this open space and behind our triangle spaces. So again, we're always practicing that drawing behind. So I'm going to actually start here with the top of my flux and draw like a little crescent moon in there. And then I'm going to bring that flux all the way back down to the corner of my orb. And then I'm going to turn upside down and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw that little crescent, and then I'm going to bring and tuck in a little flux. And I'm going to go ahead and do this one because it's the same, and now I know where I'm going. Draw that little crescent in there, and then add my little flux leaf. And this one, it's going to be really long if I go all the way behind. So I think I might just have that one little tip there and have that one be tucked a little bit. And then I'm going to come over to this one over here. I'm going to turn my page, always turning my page so I make sure it's easy to reach. And we're going to go that little crescent behind and pull that flux all the way down. I'm going to go ahead and do this one over here because it's the same direction. So 1, 2. Then I'm going to turn this one more time. We have one more open triangle space here. And again, it's a big long one, so I'm going to tuck it behind a little bit. And that is our pattern Fletch so far. It's quite a pretty pattern. There's a lot of embellishments and decorations that we can add. So I'm going to work on adding some embellishments, and then after those embellishments, some shading on this gorgeous poem, The Other Kingdoms. So I love with flux coming in and adding that center line to give it some little bit more botanical shape. Turning your page as needed, I'm just dividing about 2/3 of that flux and then adding a couple of little dots. Doing that on each of my flux, just turning my page as needed. And I'm doing again that line right up the center and 3 little dots. Just as if I were drawing the center vein of a leaf. This feels like an appropriate pattern for this particular Mary Oliver poem. That last part where she says, "Thus the world grows rich, grows wild, and you too grow rich, grow sweetly wild as you were born to be." And there's a richness and a little bit of a wildness to this pattern that seems to really, or to this yes, to the pattern that suits the poem. Again, just continuing to turn that page. Oh, and I missed an area of needing to black in here. Grab that fatter nib again. Adding embellishments is always a great way to see any of your mistakes. And in one of her samples, she went in and added texture to those triangles as well, which really makes them pop out. So I'm just basically adding parallel lines to the bottom of the triangle. Again, everything in this particular pattern is layered. So always drawing behind, which is what really creates interesting depth in a lot of Zentangle patterns, that principle of learning to draw behind. Then I'm going to turn my page. I'm going to do the same thing but in the opposite direction, so the lines are vertical and parallel, orienting the bottom of the triangle. So I'm following the bottom, the short side of the triangle, not the long side. And because I drew this bigger and it has a lot of black, I'm wanting to probably break that black up. Oops, look, I missed another spot. That's the good thing about all these embellishments and shading. You start to see where you missed things. And I'm going to go ahead and come in with my pencil. And what I'm thinking is I definitely want to shade my orbs. Pardon me. I'm going to shade them all just like a little smiley face towards the bottom of the orbs. I'll come back and smudge that in a bit so they're all kind of rounded in the same direction. I'm going to shade between my flecks to get that layered look. I don't want too much shading on the flecks because I really want them to stand out. And then I'm going to shade all around the inside of this box. You could add another pattern or inner auras to that space between. It's a lovely space. On one of her versions, she did a little grid pattern just with pencil, but I think all it needs is some shading to make it stand out. Apparently I was in a rush on my blacking in. And I'm going in a little heavy with the graphite because it doesn't spread great on this newsprint. So I'm learning to work with my materials. I'm grateful for this gorgeous book of poems from Mary Oliver. And I think what I love about this pattern is like it's a whole composition in and of itself. It doesn't need anything else, right? Little shading in that triangle. Again, I'm looking to emphasize the layered qualities of this particular pattern. And make sure the flux on the surface is really popping out. There's my, I'm going to want my white pen. So I'm going to come in with my smudge stick here, my tortillon. And I'm just going to soften that graphite. And this is where practice makes a big difference when it comes to shading. You don't want to overshade and lose all of your gorgeous line work and highlights. And it's always easiest start with a little graphite and add, because you can't take it away, but you can always add more. You can't take it away, but you can always add more. So wherever I've laid in that graphite, I'm just going in with my smudge stick here. And I can't believe next week is the beginning of November already. So in November, which will be starting next Wednesday, I will be bringing back an art journal project. I'm missing my art journaling and doing some painting. This has been a fun month, and last month was all about faces, but I'm missing working in a journal. So I want to do a art journal focused on gratitude in the month of November. I have so much to be grateful for. All right. So I love it the way it is, and I'm curious if I can break up some of that black with just some white highlights. And so I'm just going to come in and I'm going to bring that box shape back in a little bit here. Where I can. I may not be able to do that all the way around, but we'll see. It just feels like I want to break up the drama of that black just a little bit. Doesn't take a lot. And all of a sudden my squares are coming back, and that feels really good as well to bring back the shape of that grid pattern. So there, my friends, we have the lovely pattern Flutch by Heidi K. And this is day 24 of Inktober Tangles. As always, thank you so much for joining me live. Thanks for catching the replay. Please click the like button if you enjoyed what I shared today. And I will be back live next Tuesday, 1 week from today, with more poems and patterns as we finish up our Inktober Tangles 2023 and my poems and patterns. So we're not done yet. We have quite a few patterns to go. And so I'll be doing some makeup days because I'll be busy with my in-person retreat this week. But what a lovely, lovely pattern that was to illustrate the lovely, lovely poem, The Other Kingdoms by Mary Oliver. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will see you guys all live next week. Bye-bye.